Well, again, thank you and welcome to the Industry Forum 2015. We're just about to welcome our very special presenter for the evening. And while you're coming to the front, I would like to say it's wonderful to see you all here this evening, architects and contractors, designers and builders, concepts, ideas, materials. Coming together, we create more than any one of us can do alone. And this is CSI. This is where all the parties come together. And that is the mission of this group, and we're very glad to have you here. Welcome. Now we have a very entertaining and wonderful presentation for you. Over the last 7 years, Portland CSI has been building the Industry Forum into the great event that you're part of today. It's been made possible by the vision and work of very many talented professionals. And please hold your applause as I introduce the Industry Forum team. And I'm asking the team to please stand as I say your name. The chair of this event, Tony DiVincenzo of Ideate. Alexander Lungershausen, the master of the 6x10 of Henneberry Eddy Architects. Corey Morris with Carlton Hart Architecture. And special thanks to Katana Palioka, Katana Palioka, is Italian. She really put together a lot of the communication of the event, and she's with Ideate as well. And I'm Jody Moore, and we're all very pleased to have this event come together so successfully this evening. And please join me now in showing our deep appreciation for the builders of the Industry Forum 2015. We also want to shout out a thank you to the many truly wonderful sponsors and industry partners who bring the party together for us all. And to Elephant's Delicatessen, providing a delicious repast. Did you enjoy your dinner this evening? It was quite different and interesting and varied. Thank you. And of course, to the greatest venue in Portland, the Portland Art Museum. How could we have it any nicer than this? Thank you. Thank you all for being in here, participating in raising the bar for collaboration and excellence. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the individual who inspired a vision that has brought this event to life, who invited and will introduce our presenter this evening, a wonderful collaborator and keeper of cultural tradition, Don Stastny. And Donald J. Stastny, F-A-I-A, has been a practicing architect and urban designer and process facilitator for over 40 years, rebuilding communities physically and culturally throughout the country and the world. Recognized as one of the preeminent competition advisors and managers in North America, Don designs opportunities for design professionals, such as yourselves, to create outstanding architecture and places. Don's professional life is vibrant and full and does not seem to be slowing up. In the last year, he's completed 2 major competitions, the Kendall Square Urban Open Space System in Cambridge, located in the innovative quarter next to MIT, is coming to fruition. And then the 11th Street Bridge Park in Washington, D.C., a competition that we learned last fall was won by our guest presenter's firm this evening, and he did a wonderful job of leading that effort. And Don is starting a competition now for our National World War I Memorial in Washington, D.C. Believe it or not, there's not one there yet for World War I. And it will be located close to the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue, and actually you're among the first to know since it hasn't been formally announced yet. And Don's leading the design team for a memorial on the island of Molokai to commemorate the 8,000 lepers, sufferers of what is now called Hansen's disease, who were sent there by the Hawaiian government and left there to die. There are still, he says, 16 people that were sent there remaining, Native Hawaiians, and 8 of whom live in the same location where the memorial will be located. Don, very dedicated to memory and commemorating significant people and events. Here in Oregon, he's the design architect for the Oregon Military Museum. Ongoing work at Bandon Dunes, where he's developed a private nonprofit called the Wild Rivers Coast Alliance for Environmental and Economic Development. They've raised over $10 million in just 3 years and just finished an education center there. Locally, Don's designing a memorial at Willamette Cemetery for gold medal families, those who've lost family members in service to the country. And he's starting an urban design academy at Portland State University. A 2-week summer course on urban design slated for its first run this August. So urban design, as he says, urban design Portland style. A fellow in AIA, American Institute of Certified Planners and Institute of Urban Design, Don is a driving force for building collaborative partnerships and is a fierce advocate for design excellence. Please help me welcome our own Northwest treasure and my friend, Don Stastny. Oh, you're so humble.
Thank you, everybody, and good evening. Good evening. Come on, better than that. Good evening, everyone. Woo! Okay, much, much better. I always look forward to May, and for a number of reasons. First of all, the CSI Industry Forum, which I think has become kind of a touchstone in many ways of the way that we bring the construction, development, and design industries together. The second reason is that it is usually the finals of Dancing with the Stars. And so we all kind of look forward to that, I'm sure, with great anticipation. It is also this year the finals of The Voice. So if you're arguing like my wife Jan and myself, we kind of switch back and forth between The Voice, which I like, and Dancing with the Stars, which Jan likes. And the third reason is that, and I don't think my partner in crime is here, but this is the month of the birthdays of Patty Tillett and myself. And this year we are 72. The interesting thing about becoming 72 is, first of all, we've never been there before. So it's quite an adventure, and as you may have heard from other elders that might be in your community, there are kind of observations that you make. First of all, there are kind of places on your body where hair starts growing out of uncontrollably, and other places on your body that it kind of disappears completely. There's also kind of a understanding that you've really had almost over 7 decades of experience. In the case of Patty and myself, 40 within the profession itself. And you get to the point where you say, okay, I've learned an awful lot. How do I begin to take that back and share that knowledge with other people? And I think that's a little bit about what my involvement with CSI has really resulted from. Because of you all, my peers, I've had a tremendous opportunity to experience things that a small town architect from Portland, Oregon should really not be able to experience. The first competition, for those of you that are not students of my career, and I don't know why you would be, the first competition that I ran was for Pioneer Courthouse Square. And from that has resulted in over 60 national and international design competitions that I've been involved with throughout the world. I have found during those times of these competitions that I've had the opportunity to work with, beside, collaborate with, and begin to know a number of extraordinary individuals and firms around the world. And so I've kind of taken it upon myself to help in any way I can my Portland peers to bring those folks to Portland, to let you see what is being done out in other areas. My goal in all this is to essentially raise our design ideas, raise our design bar, so that the projects that each of us take on individually realizes what the power of design can be. As Jody said, I had the opportunity just recently, and I think he will speak to it tonight, to do a quite extraordinary project in Washington, D.C. And this was down by the old city of Anacostia, which is on the east side of the river, which was the poor part of Washington, D.C., the African-American community. Across the Anacostia River is the Navy Yard, and what is now developing into a whole new part of Washington, D.C. I think it's called the South Capitol Area Show. I'm not quite sure what it is, the actual term is. But this is where the new Nats Stadium is, and you go there, and every week there's a new tower up. There's a new building coming out of the ground. So they're developing a whole new area of Washington, D.C., but what it's missing is kind of the juice of what a city should be and what urban design should be. They're trying hard, but it isn't quite there yet. As a part of all this, they have reconstructed the freeway that goes across, or the bridge that goes across the Anacostia River. I think it's from kind of from the east to the west or west to the east. And in a part of that, they took off the old bridge and they lift the piers in the river. Now, the piers in the river are similar to what was built for the Brooklyn Bridge. So those big stone caissons that go down into the water. So the idea that what evolved out of this was, can we take those piers and can we create a bridge across the Anacostia that ties the community of Anacostia to this new developing part of Washington. Interestingly enough, Frederick Douglass, which you may or may not have heard of, who was one of our first black congressmen, senators, used to live in Anacostia and cross this bridge every day to go to the Capitol and come back to essentially segregated Washington. So we have an opportunity here to create a bridge, if you will, that is not only a park, an open space, but is a cultural bridge between two parts of Washington, one developing, one historic, and with different issues as far as culture, different issues as far as race, different issues as far as thinking about what a park could be that is more than a park. We started out this competition by looking for really fantastic design teams. And in the process of that, we uncovered 4 different teams, all of which brought different approaches to it. And one of these teams was a combination of OMA and Olin landscape architects. Now, that's kind of cool, you know. You got OMA, 3 letters, Olin, O-L-I-N. Looks good in a logo. But I think what it did is it said, okay, here are 2 firms who bring together an enormous amount of innovation, an enormous amount of collaboration, and can produce something that is really a fantastic part of evolving Washington, which is actually changing quite dramatically each and every day. And that's where I met Shohei Shigematsu, not bad, huh? I did it. Not bad for a Czech-speaking guy. Was representing OMA as a part of this team. And it became clear to me that Sho's both example, his collaboration, the way that OMA approached this overall project was truly unique and was the kind of thing that I wanted to have come back to Portland, to think about how they could do this. Sho himself is, as you'll see, is probably young enough to be my grandson or my son. He completed his postgraduate work in Amsterdam. and joined the Office of Metropolitan Architecture in Rotterdam. Now, this was an important time for OMA. Now we all know what the firm was. At that point, it really wasn't known too much. And one of the first projects that Sho took on, first major project, was the Whitney Museum extension proposal. Now, he was working along on this, and all of a sudden 9/11 happened, and the project went away real quick, as all of us kind of experienced different things after 9/11. But since then, he's continued to evolve a practice within the practice and designs within the overall envelope of OMA, and I think tonight what he will show you is a number of those projects along with what his thinkings are about that. I'm very interested in OMA because what I see within that organization is a evolution from older partners to younger partners. And I know this is something that's very omnipresent within the minds of many of us here in Portland, of passing on the generation to a new generation of architects. And what we hope is that the new generation of architects that are coming up take on the responsibility of creating a much better Portland, a much better Oregon, and a much better environment for design. So with that, I wish you would join me in welcoming our very special guest, Shohei Shigematsu.
Thank you. Do you hear me? So thank you for the introduction. I was thinking about it. It's true that there's a culture in OMA that Rem and his co-founders set up. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it's maybe there are some ex-colleagues here too, but being self-critical, I think that's quite a part of our culture. We're never really satisfied with our own production or our own observations, but also deriving from Rem's original profession, which is a journalist. So we are also very much taught to be very curious about what's happening around the world. So I think that's a kind of fundamental part of the education in OMA, and I think you will see some of that here, and I hope I can convey that. I speak kind of slow and kind of funny, but I show you so many slides, so you might get kind of dizzy at the end. I just want to start from my own background. This is the GDP growth over 50 years of Japan. So you can see after the war, of course, it had like China now, had a 9% growth average, but with a kind of big crisis, economical crisis, obviously it went down as a whole quite steadily. And this is like marked by different economical events, And this is a superimposition of my life to that downhill, and you can see that there's a clear kind of relationship as a 1973 born, which is a second baby boomer in Japan. So my generation has the biggest amount within Japan. So a lot of kind of post-war ideology that we were taught was completely kind of destroyed in every step of my life. So in a way that somehow influenced a lot to my kind of development and idea development as an architect, I think. You can see here that the building from 60s in Japan had an edge, a sense of material, sense of gravity, sense of everything, and sense of excitement to the next day to come. This is the mainstream architecture right now in Japan that has no sense of material, no sense of color, no sense of gravity, which of course appears to other people outside Japan as a kind of very peculiar and interesting kind of direction or aesthetics. but I really would like to resist to tell you that this is a kind of Japanese style, because I think this is just a grew from certain group of people in Japan, and also, in my opinion, grew a lot through a long-lasting recessions, which I call it a Muji style. This is a kind of brand that you might know. It's quite popular in Japan and also elsewhere. You just take logo out and you just kind of make it kind of special. But I also think this is a quite dangerous aesthetical path that Japan is taking to promote this as a Japanese aesthetics that is rooted to its culture. When I saw Muji actually sold this kind of 6 shades of gray Rubik cube, I thought it was a very dangerous path that Japan and Muji is taking. Anyway, so I was doomed to live with a downturn, so I was actually quite interested in downturn itself. So this is, as you know, the economical indexes goes down when there's a downturn. But in exchange, the human or the thinking and the other index actually goes up during the downturn. That's my kind of simple conclusion. For example, there are many examples, but the typology that gets built most during the recession is religious architecture, like the big mega church. And also, it's proven that a lot of inventions were made actually during the recession throughout the history. And then also, as you know, a lot of architectural and urban manifestos are written during the recession. As you can imagine architects, if architects don't have work, they have more time to write. But what I'm trying to say here is not to celebrate the downturn as a kind of niche, but you know, I've been working with REM, who has a very strong drive to modernization, to observe modernization, witness modernization, and also be part of the modernization, which of course comes often with the economical growth and upturn. But in my generation, basically I was doomed to live with the demodernization and downturn. But that doesn't mean that I just have to deal with this. As you know, globally, there's a lot of modernization and upturn happening more than ever in the human history. So it's not like a simple matrix where architects, ambitious architects, had to work with modernization and upturn. But you have to work also with the modernization with downturn or upturn with demodernization. So it's so diverse. Than compared to the past generation, I think. So this is a kind of a direction that the office is trying to be conscious of. For example, China. That's why it was very important for me to work in China as a Japanese person who never really truly experienced the modernization. So as you know, the mega cities, a population over 10 million is only 3 regions right now, but as you know, in 2025 there will be 15. So you will have this kind of one big city on the east coast of China. The diversity also comes from a very fundamental part of our daily life. This is a human rights index issued by UN. So as it gets red, it's bad. Yeah? So. Well, I didn't make that judgment, but that's precisely my point. Basically, what the UN says dictatorship or pseudo-democracy is gaining the biggest economical growth. That means you as an architect working internationally, you have to also deliver a public building or whatever building in a country where you don't even share the sense of human rights. So that's why I'm not saying China, we don't share the values, but we can always share the values. So this was the headquarters of CCTV in China, which is the 2nd biggest building in the world, which I was a project architect. And one thing, there's a quite complex building. It was an 18-hectare site where we had the opportunity to combine all the different departments into one single loop, to show symbolically the kind of 24 hours continuous TV making process. So studio filming to script writing to selling to also broadcasting, etc. But one contribution as an architect was, we think, it's not just design, but we convinced the client to have a public loop celebrating the shape. So they can come in here, go up, go to the observatory, coming down and peek into the studio and coming back to the same place. So as you can imagine, as a national TV station in China, in a kind of communist country, it was a very big deal to open to public. So that was already a kind of, we think, a contribution as an architect to do in this kind of situation, not just a kind of extravagant form. I'll just show you very quickly how this sits in the city. It's 234 meters, so it's not that high. And because of the cantilever at the bottom, the plinth is open to public, so it's also have some meaning. You can see the kind of daily life of Beijing juxtaposed to a kind of old futon area. And of course, because of the shape, it looks quite different from different angles. Sometimes, of course, quite overpowering. The inside is also quite intense. These are kind of just close-up shots. Structure is such that, as you can see, where the grid is intense, there are more stress. So the stress of the building is quite honestly exposed to the facade. So where the members are less, it's basically in tension. So you can see the compression and tension quite diagrammatically. So this is a lobby. They wanted to have a biggest lobby in the world, so which is actually quite true in terms of area and height. It's about 10-story high. Basically, we had to connect the subway entrance here and then the ground level entrance that has quite a height difference, and then connect it as a one big void where you go up the escalator. And the presence of the structure is quite intense, as you can see. These are the concrete columns and then the steel bracings. So everywhere you go, it's basically you're surrounded with structure. This is the observatory. Chinese government changed the regulation after this building, how much steel you can use per one building. So these are the office. So you can see this kind of clumsy moment. I mean, we thought this was kind of funny, or it's not. It's unfortunate for someone who has to work here. But this is the observatory, basically at the lowest level of the cantilever. So there's a floor window to look down, which is quite scary, to that park. Which becomes a kind of moment of tourist. So this was a book that was published by RAM in around 2000, when was that, 4? Maybe. When Bush took the, after 9/11, I think OMA and RAM had quite a kind of reaction to US, and then basically moved our focus to Asia and Middle East. But I was, going back to my initial story, I was actually quite interested in States when no one was looking at it in Europe, because I thought the kind of recession and that kind of disaster and post-crisis made US a slightly different country, and also people started to think their identity and the creativity more and more. So when everyone was doing high-rise and just chasing the boom in countries, I decided to basically take over the New York office, which at that time no one wanted to do. So partially because I was also running this project in Cornell, which I show you. Cornell Architecture and Art and Planning faculty had 4 buildings at the edge of Art Squad, facing the gorge, quite a spectacular nature. Although it's an interdisciplinary college, because the buildings, the different departments are housed in different wings and different buildings, they never had a moment of interaction. They even hated each other. Also, the new building was supposed to, basically kind of create that moment of interaction. Also, the Cornell's Art Squad is basically facing that way and has been neglecting the gorge quite a lot. But now Cornell's entire new dormitory development is happening across the gorge, so this is becoming almost a gateway for thousands of students to come in. So suddenly what has been neglected became the kind of the gateway. So that was a kind of 2 things. And actually, the third thing, which is quite unique in our case, we were the 3rd architect to be hired by the department. We were typically the first one and first one to get rid of. But we were the 3rd one, which was a kind of luxury because they couldn't fail anymore. So they were, of course, much more accommodating to our design, which never happens to our typical case. This is the kind of neglected north side, so that's the gorge. This project was also interesting because they didn't give us a specific site. They said somewhere here, like. So what we decided is not to come up with an arbitrary building again, because we thought that this over time, this building with the dome is not in center of Art Squad. There are a lot of kind of misplacement and kind of a mess that happened, and we just didn't want to deliver another building that is not defined by the context. So we said, why don't we just define the building completely out of the lines that is existing by the existing building. So you can see all these lines, which you see in pink is basically the building, is defined by existing lines. So it's almost like a found plaza, but make the plaza into a building. So it's a kind of mini Art Squad here that directs the attention to the north, and also providing a much more open and flexible learning space as opposed to this kind of Beaux-Arts type, which is completely constrained. So this was existing. So this was a studio building. This was library. This is a dome, gorge, and Art Squad. And this was a new building that touches the studio, but hugs the existing wing, the library wing. In order to give such a kind of square and efficient shape, we had to go over the road. So this was the existing University Avenue, which we cantilevered about 48 feet to basically go over the road. Not just going over the road, obviously providing some function. So we placed a new bus station here so that everyone actually can wait here while it's raining. It has some kind of relationship to the foundry. This is a sculpture studio. In order to achieve this cantilever, we had to mobilize the structure. So these are the trusses. We, of course, could have just delivered a usual truss like this, most economical. But as you can see, you have a lot of dead space where you might hit your head. And this, of course, is a very active studio space. So we wanted to provide as less obstacle as possible. So we looked at structural analysis and the circulation, and we basically made a kind of hybrid truss that Virendale turns into a truss. So almost like a kind of traveling hybrid truss. So that where there's a circulation and less moment, we kept the Virendale, and where there's a higher moment, we gradually turned into a truss. So similar to CCTV, you can see basically the students can observe the kind of force that is on this building. Because it's defined by the existing buildings only, you can basically see this kind of strange moment where the building comes out of the kind of the sides of the existing buildings. This project was also rewarding because we provided such an open-ended, open space. So, of course, the faculty didn't really know what to do in the beginning. Hence, we were quite intensely involved in basically thinking the pedagogy of architecture and art education. So it wasn't just providing a shell, but being involved in discussing the future education of architecture, which was quite exciting. So this was an open space, and now inhabited. Of course, students reuse the space very well, even the trusses. They hang out of the trusses. They pin up to the truss, which is quite not effective. Or they hide. This guy immediately made this kind of hammock to the truss, playing, riding. This is, of course, possible. This is what we wanted, almost like an extension of the open space outside, but interior. It's possible because we only have a radiant heating and some outlets on the floor, completely flexible. All the data, all the air, all the electricity, everything is embedded in the ceiling. So this is a kind of coordination drawing. So it's a lot of beam penetration of air and data and cool air, chilled air. So you can see the contrast of very basic floor to quite high-tech ceiling. There's another element we wanted to provide, which was to relate to the landscape around and something that contrasts to the very kind of defined steel box, which was a concrete dome that intersects the plate above. So you can see the dome intersects and provide an entry to the box above. Also creating this kind of open space outside that have some kind of topography. We also wanted to show the process to the students that are completely different. Like one is a steel construction and one is concrete, which has such a contrast. Steel was very fast, efficient. Concrete was such a mess and also very difficult because, of course, you couldn't fail to cast this dome in one go. So we had this kind of plywood, 4 layers of plywood to become a quite smooth surface, and then cast it overnight, almost 24 hours with like 5 different trucks. So you can see the contrast of these two means. So this is a dome where you provide a lot of activities. Even before the opening, these guys somehow attracted the kind of urban activity that was never in the campus before. So we had to kind of seize them until it opens at least. There was a lot of opposition. As you might know, Ithaca is very cold and harsh during the winter. So providing such a covered exterior space was such a battle, and we thought it was nice to provide something more urban and quite different. But of course there was an opposition. So we basically used a ceiling material that is associated with interiors. So these are kind of tin, typical American tin ceilings, but we blew up like 4 times. And pressed, and also it's basically a false ceiling. It's a perforated aluminum, which was so big that it was only possible to press in the car manufacturer in Detroit. So you can see the continuity of inside to outside, but also trying to provide some sense of interiorness even in the exterior. The dome has an auditorium above it. So you can actually go in from the studio level down to the auditorium. So this is where you're going down when there's a lecture. And the auditorium is basically on top of a dome, like this. Because it's already covered by the plate, you can actually have a certain darkness while you're kind of having a basically panoramic view to the outside. Nowadays, beamers are quite strong, so you can actually do lectures in this kind of setup. And there's a acoustic glazing, so you see the cars running, but it's kind of 3 layers, so you don't hear the sound. This was Howard Milstein, the biggest donor. The reason why I show you is that this project also went through recession, and there was a moment that was in danger of being canceled. But Howard Milstein, the head of board of trustees, wanted to have something spectacular in this building, not for the architecture college, but also for the entire University of Cornell. So he said, if you can actually accommodate the boardroom of the entire university in that auditorium while we are kind of assessing, waiting for the recession to pass, then he donates more money to basically execute the building. So we had to somewhat retrofit the boardroom into that auditorium. The current boardroom that they are using is this kind of very usual long curved chairs, and that's, of course, it's very difficult for people to people sitting in center to go out, which is very unfortunate. So what we came up with by looking at this kind of different seating is to give each board member a kind of business class or first class chairs like this. So you only need to have electricity, the voting system, and a small monitor to observe the discussion. And also it swivels, so you can actually go out quite easily, and also you can talk and whisper to other people. So we thought it will be quite dynamic. So it's like this. But one problem was that the board meeting only happens twice a year. So we didn't want to bring this chair like twice a year and then set it up and then take it away. So we were looking into kind of more integrated system. So we found this Spanish system that you can actually automatically embed the chair to the ground, and then basically with the one button, they all come out. Which we thought it was kind of interesting because, there's almost like a graveyard of board of trustees while you're using daily, and only twice a year, like a kind of zombie, like the chair will come out. So you can see quite a dramatic transformation. We also designed a chair that your back actually folds down to create this kind of bench-like condition. And also, we thought architecture and art education, you use a lot of tables to display your models and so on. So rather than flipping the seats up, basically flipped the back down. And this is the dome, basically under the dome, which is a crit space. Crit is, of course, a very important part of architecture education, so we wanted to give something quite symbolic. So this bridge is basically from the entrance, you can come to the middle level of the auditorium, and that's a bus station you see from the window, and this is a crit space. We designed a wall that can unfold and create different configurations. So this is a long concrete wall where we put this movable wall that can configure. You can pin up here, but it's movable to make this kind of zigzag shape to somewhat vaguely kind of create a zone. or you can even make one room inside. This is the image that I like, where people are observing people who are waiting for the bus station, who has nothing to do with architecture and art, is basically looking down to the crit, and then these are students, and also you can actually observe the crit from above. So it's quite a multi-level and quite diverse, quite urban. This is the freight elevator. We basically made it almost like a moving room because we knew that a lot of students, of course, make big models. They started to even make models inside the elevator, which was not so nice. That elevator is visible from the entry, so you can see this kind of room moving up and down. We designed the toilet bathroom too, because architecture education people stay very long in the school. Something exciting should happen everywhere. So we basically fold the entire the long stainless steel wall. So basically you're kind of interlocking with a different gender. So you can see here that you're always basically sitting or standing next to a different gender. Anyway, also we made the signage quite vague. So this is like a XY for men and XX. So people can make mistakes to go in which side. But obviously it's quite obvious once you're inside which side is men and which side is women. This is full height, so you don't hear the sound, you don't smell, so it's all fine. But the roof is also a kind of expression of the landscape around. So there's a series of skylights that gets bigger towards the center. Obviously, there's more deeper you go, it gets darker. And also the density of green changes from the lawn to more lush gorge. So we also changed the density of the green. I show you a couple of more institutional projects. This is a museum that is about to finish this year in Quebec. It's a National Museum Beaux Arts in Quebec, in Canada. Quebec is an interesting city. Quebec City is an interesting city where the Battlefield Park, which is a huge park, has a parallel existence to the city. So the city is basically side by side with a big park where French and English fought. The museum has been always within the park, so the identity was a museum in the park. But they acquired a site that faces the main avenue, Grand Allée, next to a preserved church. So this was the first time for the museum to acquire some presence to the city. So what we did, this was a long competition, 2 stages. What we did is almost peeling the ground, let park continue over, let city come under, and the art also extends. So we thought this was an intersection of art and park and city. So we wanted not only the art and museum to extend, but every entity that comes here wanted to. We thought it would be great to extend. So park and city and art extends all together. So it becomes something like this. You can see the topography of the park continues over the museum. The 3 boxes are basically a quite honest representation of what they wanted as a gallery. And also stepping down to create some kind of a respectful relationship to the church and creating a courtyard in between. So this is the current condition. The rendering of the Grand Hall. This is basically becomes a face of the museum to the city. It's like our kind of cliche, but it's again a cantilever. So basically, the whole space below is basically column-free space. So this is so-called Grand Hall. It's a kind of quite a big space. sandwiched by different programs like cafe, atrium, shop, and code check, and also courtyard. What's interesting about it is that in Canada, the museums are sustained not 100% by private donation like United States, so they have to raise their own revenue. So they make a lot of different events within the building to raise their revenue. So this is actually almost like an event space on the ground and then a museum gallery on top. So this is basically the kind of event area. So we had to simulate how the events could take place from a typical kind of art event to almost wedding like this. They literally do it. So this was a kind of interesting kind of typological practice. The circulation is basically justified on one side. So all the efficient galleries are saved on right side, and all the circulation and additional program are attached to the circulation. So this is B1 level where you have auditorium and the tunnel to connect to the existing complex. So this is a current picture. This is the only moment we have like curvature. The auditorium, and on the ground level you go up to this temporary gallery and also to F2 level. This is one moment that you come out of the building. We looked at a lot of research of the museum fatigue, known as museum fatigue, when people are going back and forth from dark to light, people get quite quickly tired. So we were very conscious of making a lot of gallery space and also within the circulation exposed to natural light. So this is literally coming out of the building. It's a stair, but also window to basically show the section of the building. And there are kind of forests in front of it, so you observe this kind of a moment of being liberated from the art. Facade is glazed, it's a glass. It's also triple glazing because it's very cold, but also you know, the exposure to the sun, the solar gain and so on, we had to make a triple glazing. Triple glazing tend to be a kind of heavy-handed system, but we wanted to explore the system, how we can use that triple glaze situation to make more depth. So we use 3 types of different glazing. So one is a textured glass outside that captures the light like an ice palace. And then also there's a fritted glass and then a typical glass. So 3 layers. And also typically fritting actually happens quite homogeneously, not really reflecting what's inside. It's just basically a kind of anti-solar gain. So it doesn't have a specific pattern per se, but we wanted to have something that relates to the building. So the frit happens almost like a blurred pattern of the structure behind. So this is the kind of frit pattern. It's hard to see, but now glazing is going up. It's hard to see here because there's a solid wall behind. So after doing those things, like Quebec Museum, we were almost, that started right after the recession, and if we didn't get that project, we probably had to close the office. But that kind of level of harshness that time. But what we started to realize in looking at our own path, we like making diagrams of ourselves. So like in early 2000 and mid 2000, we had a lot of course, very high profile projects like Seattle Public Library, Dallas Wiley Theater, etc. But somehow started to become a very diverse typological mix, and also very unique clients. I don't know why, but somehow we started to work for some people that are quite unique and quite visionaire. I think there's some, of course, relationship to the market economy, how museum basically grew so much to the level where they also spawned a lot of art collectors, artists themselves who are so powerful financially and also just powerful in the art world. So we show you a couple of projects that we are doing now. For example, Marina Abramovic, you might know her. She's a long durational performance artist from Montenegro originally. For example, this one, she started to walk one side of the Great Wall, and her boyfriend started from the other side for 3 months, just walking. She literally lived in front of everyone. You can see the knife ladder, so she can't go down. This was one of the most successful one in MoMA, where she just sat entire day, and then you can book a time to just sit in front of her and stare at each other. So she wanted to make a building that preserves a long durational performance. So what kind of unique project is that? So we, of course, wanted to do it. The site is in Hudson, New York, about two hours drive from Manhattan. She bought this old community theater. It's not architecturally significant. Which was interesting because the community theater was converted into a community indoor tennis court. So they literally poured a concrete into a theater. You can see the vague line of the tennis court. So they were playing tennis for a while, which is quite interesting because you can see here there was a balcony. There used to be a balcony for the theater, but the tennis court didn't fit with the balcony, so they literally cut the balcony into a shape of the tennis court. So this kind of slightly weird building. So she bought this, so we were to make a theater here. Of course, theater, you can just provide white box. You can do all kinds of performance, which is quite easy. We tested it. But of course, one unique thing about this building is that everything that happens, anything that happens in this theater should be more than 6 hours. That's the rule that she set it up. So that we couldn't change. So we had to, as an architect, come up with a kind of new typology that deals with long durational performance. And we identified 3 things that matters for long durational performance. First is staying connected. So typically, there's a performer like now, and then an audience like your side, has a kind of binary relationship. But in a long duration performance like she did in Guggenheim, it's so long that of course you can't stay and focus on the performance all the time. And maybe, I hope you can stay focused tonight. And then, so that means there is a kind of second round of audience around the first audience that is fully engaged. These audience is not fully engaged, but kind of engaged. We looked at that kind of situation, architecture, and also in other occasions, like baseball is a typical one. Current model of baseball stadiums in the States are that the concourse level, where you have concessions, are quite open, and you can actually see to the, look into the space, to the field quite well, which used to be very different. You know, whenever you go and get the beer or hot dogs, you were immediately detached from the game. So you always felt like you are missing something. But nowadays, it's quite open. Of course, baseball is some kind of long duration of performance too. It could be horribly boring sometimes. Also, of course, the baseball stadium has this kind of hybridized program where you can actually, of course, while you're having beer, you can also observe the game. Or this one in Arizona is a kind of extreme one where you have a party space which has nothing to do with the game. Of course, you can rent this space and do semi-engaged to the game, but you can also pursue your own enjoyment. So we thought this was a kind of interesting thing. So typically the lobby and performance space has this kind of hard edge. We thought that maybe concourse, like baseball stadium, the lobby should basically wrap the performance space. And not only that, she had all kinds of other programs which we thought it could be nice to array them around the performance space. So while you're doing something else, you are always interfacing the performance space. So what it does is that there's a performer, of course, in the auditorium, and audience one, which is fully engaged, but you can always go out of the room, go doing something else, but you're staying connected. So we designed the rooms like the library has a reading desk, which is the window itself to look down into. Also, the classroom has this kind of big window to look down to. The circulation also has a view into. So we wanted to make that kind of moment where wherever you are in the building, you basically can stay connected to the performance. The second one is deriving from her own method. It's called Abramovic method. Of course, as a performer, you train yourself, which is normal. But what she does is that she thinks basically the younger generation cannot endure anything boring and long, because she really literally confiscates your phone and let you wear this lab coats, and you really have to go through this training to become a certified audience for the long durational performance. So which is quite complex, because you can see here people are training, they're not performing, they're training to be the official audience. So you even get the certification after going through this training to be an official audience. So what we did is those trainings are right on the second level. So you come up here and then you do all this training. By the time you come back, you're a certified audience. Anyway, these are trainings. But what's interesting here is not just that, but this was when she did it in Milan. So these are not performers again. They're trying to be the audience. But there are, of course, the second level of audience who thinks they are performing and basically observing. Which we thought it was also a very interesting architectural challenge and interesting moment where typically, of course, you look at the performers only, but in this building, you basically no longer know where to look at, because you no longer know who is the performer and who is the audience, which we thought it was quite interesting. The third issue is a chair. Please imagine sitting in your chair for more than 6 hours. So we thought the theater is often defined by the chair, so we had to come up with something else. This is a chair she literally used in the MoMA event, because she put the strict rule that she can't even stand up during the performance, so she had the toilet embedded in the chair. So we had to come up with some kind of chair. Dealing with long duration, of course, there are different ways. Of course, this is a typical way that happens also in our office quite often. Or space station, or a bed in the hospital, or even the flights are, of course, long duration where you are locked into one zone. Again, this one was also eye-opening, because she basically, of course, working out while she's working. Again, this kind of hybridization of ambition was, we thought it was interesting. So for now, we combined basically the comfort and mobility, because Marina thought that mobility, if you give a mobility to chair, you basically change the entire dynamics of the theater. So it has to be comfortable, but also it has to be mobile, so you can actually manipulate and move yourself. The current design is hard. It's far from looking comfortable, a kind of wooden wedge. She liked this because, well, we proposed it, but she liked it very much because it looks like coffins on the ground looking to the performers. The reason why she likes it is that she thinks sleeping is a strong reaction to your performance. She doesn't accuse people going to sleep when there's a long duration. So she wants to embrace people who goes to sleep. So that's why she wanted to have a chair that is also comfortable. Also, she thinks that her staff should roll people who went to sleep out to a more comfortable zone. So we made this kind of chamber where people can get relaxed during the performance. The exterior is quite straightforward. We are not touching so much of the existing structure. We made the model also a little bit part of her performance. So because there are so many windows looking into the performance space, we made this model where you can put your head in and basically observe those windows. So that became instantly a kind of a device. This was a fundraising event at MoMA for people to enjoy. Of course, Kanye West is a very different type to the type that I was talking about in terms of recession and kind of gaining a power. But obviously, he gained his own power through his own industry, but now he's very much interested in design, as you might know. So he knocked on our door one day saying, "Why is cinema only one screen?" We couldn't answer why, but of course, we also told him a lot of architects have tried in the past to have multiple screens. But he said, well, let's try because I want to become a film director. I also want to film with 7 cameras and then also have 7 screens. He didn't tell me why 7. He just liked the number. But anyway, it was a kind of interesting start. So we took him seriously. So immediately kind of started to test. What is interesting is, of course, you can easily imagine 7 screens, kind of, no? But his ambition to actually have 7 cameras like this was also for us interesting. So this is the immediate test we did, like a crude one, like outside, having kind of 7 cameras filming simultaneously. And this is a final one that he actually used to film his short film with 7 cameras attached to each other. So this was the final configuration of screens, 3 in the front, 2, one big ones in the front and the ceiling, and then sides. First, we were asked to also design the pavilion, so we kind of started to look at how these screens can actually become the pavilion itself. So we thought maybe it could start from a box and start to open and become 7 screens. Or immediately we thought, okay, he's a celebrity. If we make something kind of interesting and multi-scale and work with gadget companies, you can actually sell this kind of 7-screen goggle or something. Anyway, we tested many things. But quickly the project evolved because he decided to show his first film in Cannes Film Festival. It happens typically here. He rented a space next to an abandoned casino in the parking garage here. So that immediately canceled our plan to design the pavilion because it was so short that we didn't have time to go through the structural and fire test of France. So we had to choose out of these kind of 4 existing pre-approved, prefab tents, which we chose the pyramid, not because of this image, but of course his obsession slightly to this kind of ancient Egyptian thing at the time. And obviously the kind of Jay-Z's label, people do this kind of pyramid sign. So we thought pyramid was perfect. Also, we were actually happy that during the Cannes Film Festival, you have this kind of not vernacular, but all these kind of temporary tents all over the place. So we wanted to make something that looks like them, but slightly different. So what we did is to take we took the existing structure, but we cut all the small beams and replaced it with one big beam to make it look like a floating pyramid instead of just on the ground. And this pyramid is not only a shed, but the actual structure to hang all the necessary elements, like the 7 screens and the sound system and the projectors, like this. One last design we inserted was that, of course, while observing Cannes Film Festival, the film itself is becoming a little bit more obsolete than a red carpet moment. So everyone basically goes there to watch people, the celebrities coming in. So we thought maybe in order to get rid of that kind of red carpet and inside this continuous moment, we basically continue the red carpet entirely into the building so that red carpet continues from the beginning to the end. We had to also very strictly work with the security people because, of course, himself is a celebrity, and also his friends who are supposed to come to the opening is all celebrities, so we had to script the circulation of how they come in, get a picture, they experience the pavilion, and secretly go out. So this is a kind of red carpet. Because it was a pre-approved structure, it was easy to erect. So this is a final pavilion. So you can see with the light, the red actually glow. This is his friends. I think there was Kanye. Yeah, that's Kanye and Kim. Just so that you know. His friends. The reason why we lifted was not just to make it different. We knew that from this area, the coast of Cannes is quite beautiful. So we basically wanted to make a window while preserving the darkness to observe the entire coastline. Because also in this moment, there are a lot of super expensive boats all over the world floating in this bay area, which is also quite beautiful at night. So these are the 7 screens. I wish I can show you the actual film, but of course you can see this is a floor and the ceiling, so the camera actually captured things that you can't, of course, capture. Also, he showed, it's not here, but he changed the speed in some cases. For the front 3 screens had a usual speed, but the 3 others had a slow motion or something. So it was well done. So this was a kind of floating pyramid here in the Cannes. Another building is another kind of self-conscious client. He's Alain Faena. He's basically a kind of developer from Argentina, but also used to be a fashion designer. He used to be a very successful fashion designer in Argentina, but he suddenly kind of quit fashion design. He grew roses in the coast of Uruguay for like 5 years, doing nothing. And then suddenly one day he had a realization in the port of Buenos Aires, Puerto Madero. He found this old abandoned silo and he decided to renovate this to a hotel. After so many tryouts, because he never had any kind of development history nor funds, so he had to work very hard to convince people. But he convinced Philip Stark to change this abandoned silo to a 5-star hotel. So that whole area, which used to be the most dangerous and bad area in Buenos Aires, now after this success, this entire area is one of the most high real estate zone in Buenos Aires. His tactics is quite interesting because he just doesn't do development, but he also always insert culture. So he also acquired this old building where he is running a gallery, big kind of museum-like gallery. So his tactics is always culture and commercial together. So you can see, as you saw in the first image, it was only this building. Now all the other developers basically capitalizing on his success. With that success, he is now coming to Miami Beach. This is our site, 34th and Collins, which used to be vibrant, but during the for the longer time, it was abandoned. So it's a similar moment when he came to Buenos Aires. So this is the old Saxony Hotel and the site. So now he's renovating the hotel with Baz Luhrmann, the film director. He actually has an architectural firm in Australia. And Norman Foster is doing a condominium here. And across the street, we're doing 3 buildings for him. This is a moment where the salt water and the water is quite close in Miami Beach. Also, this is a moment where the Collins Avenue, which is the main boulevard of Miami Beach, and the kind of creek is quite close. So we wanted to make something that has different face to different sides. So the Collins Avenue having a official face, but also to the creek towards the residential side having different volumes. So this was our first model that looks like a kind of series of chocolate truffles or something, but they are trying to say that, you know, with these 4 buildings, we create a kind of neighborhood rather than 1 big building and 2 small buildings. As you might know, Miami Beach, this is the beach side, so it's very difficult to get people from beach side across the street to the other side because there's nothing on the other side. But we had, because it was a cultural program that he really puts as a kind of his heart, we had to brutally claim that this is the center of the complex. So we made a kind of circular shape to provide much bigger sidewalk space around. Also, we almost kind of claimed the kind of, not a conspiracy, but almost claimed that this old geometry used to be together, but somehow, like a Pangea, it became a kind of separate continent. And of course, he liked that. And also the round shape resonates the Miami Beach modernist style. Also, we thought it was interesting, the case of Guggenheim. You know, Guggenheim had originally planned their museum in the park like Met, but they had to, of course, build within the residential district, one of the most conservative people in the world, Upper East Side. So it had gained this kind of magical scale just because they are surrounded by residential buildings. So we thought it was a similar case. Actually, magically, the scale is quite similar too. We thought it was a kind of similar case in our side where we had to place a kind of a cultural building in a residential side here. Also, programmatically, this is also why I call it a new typology, is that it's an art space, but also a commercial space. As I explained, he has 2 ambitions. Also, art form is becoming very diverse and different nowadays. You know, gallery space needs to do performance, visual art, events, etc. So the kind of things that you have to deal with as a gallery space is becoming a very diverse and rich. So he gave us this kind of abstract analogy like forum. So this should be a forum where you can meet people, but you can also do events. So what we decided to do is to make a most complex building, most flexible building that you can possibly make. So as you saw, there are 2 volumes that are attached, creating 2 different spaces. In plan, one is circuit round, one is a black box. And also in section, the circular part has a dome. So one is a kind of classical form, and one is more contemporary black box. That could be used together as one big space, almost 1,000 people event, or you can use separately for dealing with different art events. There is a sliding wall that separates the 2 acoustically, so you can do 2 events simultaneously. There's also a lobby here, that mirrors the dome here as a kind of a ball. where you can also do small events. So you can practically basically do 3 events simultaneously. So that was our take on how to deal with the new typology. Also, the arrival in Miami Beach is quite important because you come from a lot of hotels has this kind of very luxurious, lush, welcoming lobbies. So we also cut the building so that the landscape can slide under. And this is a final shape. One side it looks like one building. From the other side it looks like 2. In order to sustain this cantilever, we mobilized skin as a structure. So it's a series of arches and catenary curves like a cables that holds that cantilever and that ties back to the ground here. That is superimposed to the anti-hurricane window size that is regulated in Miami Beach. So those 2 are overlaid to make this kind of pattern. So this is a kind of structure, which we kind of liked, of course, because it looks like a kind of palm tree, organic, a little bit suited for Miami. The circulation is like Guggenheim. You walk around the perimeter. So you come in from that lobby, you go up, you go to the lobby, you go up to the main space. And then the dome is structural and you have oculus, so you have some sense of natural light coming down, like a Pantheon. Also, it has a kind of acoustic system embedded on the ceiling. So this is acoustic foam that absorbs many different types of events requirement. And there's at the end of the circulation, you have this kind of balcony to look down into the event. We also designed this mechanical parking that we expose the car elevator and people's elevator next to each other so you can see people and cars going up and down. So it's under construction. It will open this December with Art Basel. So these are the kind of window frames being cast like this and then taken away later. Now it's at the 3rd level. This is where the dome is. So this is, the parking is yet to come. So these are the kind of cultural projects. I would like to show you briefly how we are dealing with commercial projects, because I think, of course, that's also one of the interests we have. But we have a completely different look at it. This is City of Tokyo. This is a ring line, which is big enough to house different characters in different zones. So whenever you go to different places, you have different characters. If you kind of compare that to, let's say, dinner table with your family, it's a kind of a la carte style where you share different dishes, different ingredients, and then it becomes a kind of conversation stimulator. But nowadays, as you know, there are a lot of mixed-use developments that have almost exactly the same ingredients and prepackaged. So these are 2 big development that happened recently in Tokyo that has almost exactly the same ingredients, which we compare to, instead of a la carte style, bento box. So you basically have this kind of prepackaged, nothing wrong with bento box. I eat bento box, but I'm just saying as an analogy, you basically kind of predict what your experience is. So instead of a kind of very unpredictable, diverse table, you're dealing with something that is so predictable and so defined, which of course, as an architect, it's a problem because you are asked to make something special, special buildings. But if the program and the experience and the ingredients are basically the same, it's very difficult for architects to make it special. So you have to mobilize facade, etc. But I think that those are not fundamental. So we wish to react to this kind of case because it's not just Japan. I think it's happening everywhere. So of course, we have to deal with it. So we show you 3 projects that we are doing now that deals with this kind of mixed-use problem. One is in Jersey City here, across downtown Manhattan. Ironically, the renaissance of Jersey City came after 9/11 when the financial district moved. So this is a kind of Gold Coast of New Jersey now. Our site is here next to an old energy station. But anyway, the developer wanted us to do something like this. We said no, but we were, of course, aware of the very strict guideline and the norms of New York developers. So we decided to use the known ingredients to come up with something unknown. So typically, the mixed-use building is a hermetic one tower, have different programs inside. We wanted to reverse that thinking. We said ourselves, what if you have a perfect volume for each given program, and what if you stack that into one building? So all this program, we identified through the developer's norm a perfect volume, and then we basically stack them on top of each other. So that creates this kind of continuous vertical open spaces that could be used for the program, adjacent program. And of course, what we liked about it is that the building looks like you basically assembled different developers building around and stack them on top of each other. So it could look maybe banal in some angle, but of course in the skyline it has a kind of maximum effect, and developer of course has to pay the premium of the structural cantilever, but within each box it's almost a perfect plan. So they were of course happy, although this project is on hold, so it's not so convincing what I'm saying. But learning from this, we started to do a similar take in other places. This is in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. As you know, it's a very vertical city. And Sao Paulo has changed its center multiple times, the old center, and this is a 5th center. And we are doing, our site was L-shaped, and also a designated zone for the new business district. So all these towers were to come. It was quite interesting because this was Walmart, and this was an art school. So this is an old factory converted into art school, and here comes the Walmart. So our building, our site was in between those two entities. So of course, first question we asked the client, do you really want to be part of another 1,000 towers around? So what we said, similar to Jersey City, is to come up with a perfect volume and then stack them on top of each other, but this time quite horizontally, like a screen. We wanted to basically shield the art school from Walmart. Also, because it was Brazil, in the intersection of each program, we made a sky lobby that is half open, because as you know, Brazilians use public space quite well, and also the climate allows them to do so. So this was a final shape. It's a kind of huge wall with this program, museum here, and then the sky lobbies that provides different lobbies. And this was a Walmart. We convinced them to at least green their roof, and this is the art school. You can see how radical the volume is compared to the other towers. This is a Copan, very famous building done by Niemeyer. When we won this competition, Niemeyer passed away like a week later, so we think it's a kind of, somehow, it's the same scale here, a kind of straightened version of his masterpiece. Again, inside is quite efficient, and these in-between spaces have this kind of very open plan. Also, the site is L-shaped, as you saw, and the Walmart also gets built first. So the site was very constrained. So we talked with developer and also engineers to the construction sequence, which is quite interesting. So we build 4 cores first, and then basically start building from top to bottom. So that saves us about half a year of construction time. A lot of people think that architects' ultimate ego is towers, tallness. But I personally think it's not the tallness, but it's kind of wallness. So as you know, like a lot of people actually planned a wall in a kind of their imaginary projects. And unconsciously, like in Hong Kong, of course, the wall buildings are happening. And as you know, this one, it's not quite a wall, but it's a kind of a big wall. So we discovered that the client actually got the site next door. So we basically now convincing them to basically continue the building, like the kind of Great Wall of Sao Paulo. There's a kind of thanks you for the poster, but the poster is this project. It's a project in Santa Monica, in LA here, 4th and Arizona. Santa Monica has a great history of inside and outside living. This is the Arcadia bathhouse, which located right at the beach. So the inside and outside was quite, of course, close. And as you know, the climate, half of the year, they don't even need air conditioning. So the program was mixed use, but it was city-owned land, so we had to also provide as much open space as possible. So we decided instead of making a one big open space on the ground, to give open spaces and terraces, plazas for each program. So typically, maybe the solution could be like this, one big plaza and building, but we basically unhinged the building to create a kind of cascade here, that each program has its own garden in front. This is a building called Hanging Gardens of Babylon. As you might know, Babylon, the tower is quite famous. It's a symbol of tallness. But there's this, the king of Babylon actually made this building for his wife, because his wife was very, she was missing her kind of own land that was quite mountainous and landscaped. So he built that. So this is a kind of symbol of basically land as opposed to the tower. So we just showed that to the city and then basically said, okay, this could be very civic and also reflecting the lifestyle of Santa Monica. So this is the 3rd Street Promenade here and the ocean, and this is how the landscape goes up. So I just show you the kind of quick animation. I will stop at the middle. I just want to show animations because OMA doesn't have this kind of image that we do high-tech things, but we do. So we just want to show some evidence. What's interesting here is that because the ground level retail is so big and deep, we actually managed to convince the developer to bring a cultural program in the center where you don't need any light and exposure. So there's a children's museum in the heart of the complex. And in each intersection, you have basically atrium to connect to different programs. So I show you very quickly another commercial project. This is in Miami Park, Coconut Grove. Coconut Grove is here, Miami Beach here. Coconut Grove is one of the first settlement in Miami, so a lot of people actually settled here first in Miami. So it has its own bohemian, distinct culture. So it's seen as a kind of opposite to kind of vulgar Miami Beach style. The site was here quite important site where the old city grid actually meets the waterfront nature. And this is a site, there used to be convention center and the city hall is still here. And now this will be converted into sculpture park. The client is Terra and related. Terra is doing a building. This is out of battery maybe. But you can see on the right, there's a kind of twisted building that BRK Angles is doing. So our site is here, which is a strategic point where you connect the park to the community. There was a competition with 5 different firms, international, which we won. That the model plan was this kind of 2 fat towers. As you can see, there are like series of twin towers, quite fat, basically kind of blocking, we thought, the continuity from the city to the waterfront. So we thought this was a kind of not a good tendency, so we wanted to give certain porosity to this site because it was the last remaining site to connect the city to waterfront. So we took their model plan but subdivided into 6 towers instead of 2 and basically proposed a kind of very unusual slenderness to the site, to the area. That has kind of staggered so that at least the views to each others are not so serious, the compromise. So this is when you do 2 towers. This is when you do 6 towers. So it's only 2 units per floor, and then, of course, at the top, it's only 1. We won, but immediately after we won, they said this is not commercially viable, so please go back to, I like your thinking, but we can't do your project. We tested many different types, 4 towers, 5 towers, 3 towers, resisting to 2. But in the end, what we did is quite funny, in my opinion. Basically, we had this kind of 6 towers, and then we basically combined them into 2 towers, almost like a reverse mitosis. So as if they used to be, as if it's kind of separate. So it has this kind of peanut-shaped plan. This is Marina City in Chicago, as you know, architecture masterpiece. But do you know the kind of earlier plan, which was this kind of a combined elevator in the center and a kind of efficient share in the core, which we thought it's a kind of interesting history. So we basically combined those slender towers into different lobes and made those clusters of tubes, which we also refer to kind of Florida Keys, this kind of undefined landscape edge, an island edge. Also, this is an installation from Christo in 80s that demarcated all these kind of archipelagos in this area, which we thought was also quite interesting. So it's almost like those archipelagos coming into the site. So it has this kind of undefined edge, organic edge, as opposed to very straight kind of towers along the waterfront. So you can see the transparency in the center because it creates narrowest moment there. And we externalize the structure like this. So there's no internal columns because we thought the future flexibility is of course important, but also this kind of waterfront typology is basically providing wide open glazed facade which has no character whatsoever. So we thought this kind of structure can at least frame the view and create certain character when you're looking outside. So these are the kind of structural columns. Of course, when you're inside, it's not that basically interrupting, so you have this kind of view. I go very quickly. This was I'm showing this because it leads to another project that I will show you in San Francisco. So this is the project we did pre-recession in 2008 in Manhattan, 22nd Street. It was a very strange moment where a developer asked us to design a tower when the other tower was almost complete, but it will become a twin tower basically sharing the lobby and the base. So this was our site. This was that One Madison Park tower that was already under construction. It was a kind of unequal twin tower. Ours is shorter, but having screening room and lobby, and on the quieter side, 22nd Street side. We only had 33 feet as a site. At that moment, obviously, the architects were, of course, deployed to use every possible ammunition to boost the per square foot cost. I mean, still is. Shape, facade, historical reference, the height, etc. We tested many forms, but this is in Flatiron District. We thought the Flatiron kind of pristine is coming from the kind of straightforwardness in extruding its site. So we looked at the condition again and just decided to reflect what we are asked and given. So this is the program area the developer had. Developer gave us a kind of vague height limit because he already pre-sold the units here. But he had more areas to sell. So he wanted, of course, the entire area to be sold, incorporated into our tower, but also didn't want us to go higher than 250 feet, which is physically impossible. But also he had the air rights of the David Chu's building here, so we could cantilever a little bit. So we decided to basically go gradually cantilever over that building, but also after 250 feet sway away from the building that was already existing. So that somehow resembled to typical New York setback buildings that are also mirrored at the bottom. We thought it was a kind of exciting hidden child between the Chrysler and Empire State. So this was the shape. Also by swaying away, the building gained the view to the Madison Square Park. So sometimes it looks like a typical stepped New York building. Sometimes it looks like a shy child behind a parent. Sometimes it shows its entirety. This is a view from 22nd Street, from 23rd Street. We mobilize the structure so that in the center you have the kind of core set, like a structural frame, and then it creates a variety of different plans, from panoramic to more loft-like with a higher ceiling. Of course, we liked this building in a kind of light of recession, economical argument I told you earlier. We liked the building that looked like a kind of rising. But of course, if you look at it from the other angle, it looks like a decreasing. So of course, somehow it became a victim of the Lehman shock. So this project got canceled. But now, we are doing a project in San Francisco, here in Trans Bay. As you know, this was an area where the bridge came in, all the infrastructure somehow defined this area. But as you know, after the earthquake, this area entirely kind of got abandoned. But now finally it's becoming this kind of another post-crisis moment where it's becoming one of the highest concentration of new developments. So this is currently, from a view of our site, there will be so many towers. Our site is here, Block 8. The Trans Bay Terminal is here. And there's a kind of two pedestrian route. One is on Clementina and one is on Folsom. But because there's an off-ramp here, anyway, above the pink block, there's an off-ramp. So where the cross is, basically it's very difficult to cross as a pedestrian. So we thought it was actually nice for people to actually go through our site to go to the Folsom. So we basically cut the building into half and provided a paseo and a square in the center so that people can actually shortcut to the other side. So this is a development guideline, so it's a box, but by opening up, it creates this kind of passage. So this is our current state. We liked, so this is a paseo. We liked that 22nd Street project so much. It was heartbreaking when it got canceled. But we wanted to maybe unconsciously do the same move. But here, we basically used that cut and extended the cut to the tower. Typically, the logic of the tower governs the logic of the podium. But here, we wanted to make a reverse. Podium's logic basically extends up to the tower. So we cut the podium, we cut the tower as an extension of the podium until the mid-level. So you have this kind of cut towards the middle, like this. So when you're looking up from Paseo, the cut actually continues up. But also we discovered that there is, of course, incredible view towards the bridge here. So at the top, we basically kind of fanned and providing terraces for the southern exposure. So this is our tower here. That's the Transbay Tower. So you see one side is basically stepped on the south side, providing much greater view to the bridge, like here. But when you're closer, you see this kind of cut rising from below. So you have this kind of slightly more polite version of 22nd Street I just showed you. So the cut from the ground and the cut from the sky basically creates this kind of symmetrical elevation, like this. And that datum somehow relates to the datum of the other surrounding buildings. Am I going too much? Just final two projects. It's more interesting than commercial projects, sorry. As an architect, it's very important to create your own initiative. So, you know, going back to the initial introduction of OMA is thinking we also try to use academic institutions and so on to pursue our own initiatives. And I'm currently teaching at Harvard for 3 years, basically continuing one research topic, which is food. It's called alimentary design. Why I got interested in food was when you see the three fundamentals of human being, clothing, shelter, and food, basically clothing and shelter somehow yield to globalization quite easily. Wherever you go, you kind of see the similar thing. But food is the only one within those three that remains to be global, but also quite local at the same time. And the food is, at the moment, the biggest industry. And as you know, a lot of architects have designed a city based on the production of food. And now, as you know, the 40% of Earth's land is agriculture, but also the city is growing quite rapidly. So this is a scene in China where, of course, the agricultural land and the city is interwoven. For example, I'm just showing the relevance of food. This is a project called Super Farm that is now being done by Singapore, government of Singapore and China. So it's a new city dedicated to basically sustain entire Singapore's population in the north of China. 2011, for the first time in human history, the consumption of fish exceeded the consumption of beef. That means more people are eating fish now than ever. So this is the inverse of land and water. So if you think of a place where you live is close to food production, now finally living on the ocean or close to where you have a biggest resource of food is becoming real. This is the city of Hainan in China. Again, like there's a village, but you can imagine like a Tanget's Tokyo Bay project and so on. Could be real related to the food production. Interesting thing about food is that it extends to many different levels. I also think this is interesting where Amazon started from distributing books, now distributes fresh food. Uber started from distributing people, now distributes food. So I think the food is, of course, interesting kind of endpoint at the moment. The relationship of mobility and food is also interesting. This is the first McDonald's, which was a car hop store. And as you can imagine, mobility is now redefined, and you can imagine those, the food, the typology of architecture that deal with that mobility is also changing. Like the food truck is becoming, as you know, one of the dominant element in the city. This is also interesting. The canteen is one of the most socialist typology of eating, but now it's used at the most capitalist companies such as Google as a vehicle to run the company. So I think that's also a very interesting point. And also nowadays you can actually print food itself. So this is you can print now chocolate, pasta, many different things. So I'm running a studio. These are the projects. I don't go into it. But one thing, for example, interesting is that we mapped the global climate change and also how the crops are basically becoming less productive in the world. And you know that there's actual research that only two areas will remain productive in the crop production. One is Central Asia, China and Kazakhstan, and one is here where we are. So it's actually quite interesting, like how Cascadia and the local food movement, you already have some people actually talking about independence. Maybe it's not serious people, but it's actually quite interesting because if you think that food becomes a power, because you know that food will be short soon, like oil, how the kind of Middle Eastern countries gained its, of course, credibility by having a natural resource, the food will be the resource. So for me, it's very interesting that the Cascadia actually has its potential to become a kind of a center of that kind of political domain, not just production. So this is one student who designed the airport in such an occasion where the food production and airport, which is a kind of very authoritarian architectural typology, is mixed into a one big landscape. So we are doing a food hub in Louisville, Kentucky, spawned from this studio. Food has been very close to, producer and consumer. Basically, you made your own food in your garden. You dealt with basically animals in your house. But nowadays, because the city and the food production became so far, you can't, you don't even know what's happening as a consumer and a producer. So this is a USDA typological food hub that is basically combining these three processes into one building and bring this into town so that the distance to the food is slightly closer than before. But this, of course, it exists as almost like a distribution center, so architecturally it's very poor, as you can see here, the existing food hubs. So we decided to the client decided to make something a little bit more meaningful in Louisville. As you know, Kentucky is located in the quite productive aerial land. The site is West Louisville, where it's in a poor African American community because it's flooded quite often. The site is quite big. like the entire Tiananmen Square fits, or the Churchill Downs, the Kentucky Derby, you can run along the site. This food hub has many different programs on top of the USDA-defined food hubs. So farming, processing, community kitchen, retail, and recycling. So you have this kind of quite variety of program. But architecture, as you saw, it's almost like a distribution center, so it's an industrial building. So we basically arrayed the entire length in one go of one industrial building over the site, which became such a length. But we basically compressed that to deal with two things. One is that this site is so big that a lot of city civic streets are terminating. So we wanted to make big squares in the end of all this terminus of those big streets. And also the West Louisville, which is again flooded and never really developed properly, has different grids. So this building is also trying to compensate those two different grids. One city side, which is of course more rich side, and the poor side. The other thing is to create a public side and a logistic side. So this is, again, logistically very heavy, a lot of trucks coming in and out. We wanted to shield that logistical portion to the public side. So the public side facing that way and logistical side facing this way. And also the landscape relates to those ambitions. So you can see there's a market here, there's a food truck plaza here, demonstration farm. And we wanted to make some kind of special architectural moment in the intersection of each bars. So there's a visitor center here, there's a community kitchen here, and this is the hydroponic and aquaponic tower that you can observe. So this is a food truck plaza. This is at the terminus of Jefferson, which leads to the city hall. So we wanted to make a water tank because there's a retention of water here too. So that looks like a kind of food. Becomes a symbol of this development. This is a market, this is a demonstration farm, this is a community kitchen. Finally, the last project that Dawn organized. I think it's also quite a strong tendency, almost like a Bilbao effect in 98, 96, 97. After the success of Highline, every municipality wants to have Highline. Obviously, its success is famous. You know, a lot of people are now trying to do same things, but not the kind of reappropriating the existing infrastructure, but ground up new. This is the one that Heatherwick is doing in London. There's one competition in Atlanta, similar. I was, of course, looking at the Portland example, Bridgetown, and this new bridge, I can't really pronounce, Tilcomb crossing, bridge for people. I think it's a very interesting discourse we can do whenever we have time. Today is too late, but Diller, this is Scofidio himself saying that it was successful because it was not architectural. I kind of disagrees with him because I think the Highline had certain restrictions and also width restrictions. And obviously he worked with James Corner, field operations, and of course, as you might know, there's still a dispute who did this project. And for him to say it was successful precisely because it was not architectural, for me, is not really fair. That's why when we got this project, an opportunity to join 11th Street Bridge project, we decided to make that point clear. The potential of architecture still can also contribute to a public space. I mean, why do you think that the landscape is the only way to deal with that? So this is the site. This is the Anacostia side. This is the DC side. As Dawn said, there's a kind of art and culture movement, but predominantly African-American community. and entertainment and development happening on this side. We wanted to make this, of course, symbolic. Two different cultures meeting two different, let's say, economical zone. Also, we wanted to make something that is not entirely just a kind of landscape project. Typically, the bridge goes gradually up, as you know, to make a clearance for the ship to surpass below. So that's typically like 1 to 20, where you don't need landing. So that's 1 to 20, less than 5%. We decided to basically continue that and continue the path so that this crossing actually becomes a very symbolic crossing, not only in plan, but also in section. Of course, we wanted to refer to the existing kind of symbolic symbols. Basically, the L'Enfant's plan of DC is basically based on this crossing. A lot of important buildings, as you know, are located in this crossing. And these crosses have not like a grid. It has a kind of cute angle like this. So we thought it was a very interesting similarity. So one that is a little bit more lush coming from the Anacostia side going over, and the one that comes from Navy Yard intersects and create a moment of intersection and a plaza in the center, but you can also continue to go up to the bridge, which also is acting structurally logical by extending this. Those arms are actually a suspension to basically sustain the bridge. It also provides the shelter for the programs that were required below the bridge, like cafe and performance space. So, you know, there are a lot of programmatic bridge, but we thought it's a kind of Rialto, but kind of doing slightly more wild things. So this is the bridge. So you see, you can read the cross, but there's a kind of plaza in the center. And because you can still continue up, you know, you can gain a view that is not possible typically in this kind of bridge, overlooking both sides, Anacostia side and the DC side. And this is a performance space at the end of the space, so you can actually continue over and enjoy the view, but also potentially having a performance. And also, this has a water infiltration function, so we're symbolically showing that as a kind of cascading water, but we're also projecting the history of the Anacostia side to that waterfall, to tell the story of the Anacostia side, which is about to be gentrified. So we wanted to. Of course, we wanted to make some kind of statement that it's a new symbol of DC, but you can see how impossible that is. But we thought it could be interesting to make a new bill, because, you know, X is a 10, so we even wanted to change the 10 to X. I think it's quite interesting, this tendency of Bridge Park. This is the old plan of Raymond Hood, basically connecting Manhattan to everywhere. I can easily imagine after the success of High Line, every city has this kind of super extensive connections for people to enjoy. Thank you. Sorry, I talked too long.
No, you did wonderfully. Thank you.
Fascinating. Can you see why we bring people like this here to at least dream? Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had the Columbia Crossing Bridge designed by someone who really cared about bridges?
Yes, isn't that the truth?
We have a tradition with CSI that we borrowed show from our Native American brothers and sisters that live in this area.
Oh, wow.
And it is a tradition that to honor people that come and be a part of our event, to blanket them, which
great.
is a tribal way, of thanking you and honoring you and wishing you to come back soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Like a, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Like a architecture refugee.
This is actually a blanket, which is from the Timberline Lodge, which is one of the WPA projects up at Mount Hood. So it is an architectural blanket, but it's from the WPA period. So
Thank you.
And may you wear it in good health.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming,
Thank you.
Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't do any questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming this evening, and what a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Sho. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you very much. Have a safe drive home, and thank you again for coming this evening to enjoy this wonderful work with us this evening. Thank you.